Whew, we are moving. Okay, media theory number 2, agenda setting theory. This is a theory that tells us that the media does not necessarily tell us what to think, but what to think about. In other words, we are smarter. We are smart enough to know that the media doesn't tell us what to think, but the media has an agenda, and therefore they tell us what to think about as we go about our daily lives. So you could start, for example, by Googling a major news website. Okay, so get online, Google Times or New York Times or SACB or CNN, Fox News, whatever you want, a major news website, and just scroll through the first 3 to 5 headlines. Notice if those are things that you've thought about recently, that have been on your mind, or if you were completely caught off guard by the headlines. According to agenda setting theory, media consumers, judge the importance of a particular thing in the same way that the media judges its importance. So what that means is that whatever is the cover story, the top story, the newest story, the most important one according to the news website, that we, the viewers, think it is equally important simply because its location is on the top of the page or its timing is top of the hour. So here's an example, and I think my little face is covering the bar graph here, but that doesn't matter. Think back to the 2016 election. The then Republican candidate, Donald Trump, was talked about by voters, given many of the provocative comments that he made. That is simply a fact. That level of talk was matched by getting almost as much television news coverage as all the other political candidates combined at the time. So in other words, the media made it a big deal, so we, the consumers, thought it was a big deal, which then gave it more airtime, which then made us judge it with greater importance and become part of our daily conversations. I hope that kind of makes sense. Here's some critiques. The critiques of this theory are that if a story doesn't resonate with the public, like simply we disagree or it's not as sexy, provocative, important as we thought, that neither the media nor the candidates nor the viewers can really make each other care in the same way that they would if we all rallied behind a particular idea. What it also argues is that an issue becomes important through extensive coverage. So if the media doesn't leave something alone, we judge that thing with more importance simply because it has received extensive coverage. We could also ask ourselves then, what important issues ignored by the media simply don't get enough coverage but really are valuable or important? And also, why do you think that some news makes it on air, in the podcast, on the internet, top of the hour, but not others? For example, celebrity news. Celebrity news is considered very important by a majority of viewers in the United States. So here's some research on work applications. First, you could think about the pattern of news coverage across major broadcasts and social media as measured by prominence, the position of the story, but also length of the story, how much room, how much time is given to a particular story. And there's a link there to Time Magazine where you can do the same. Simply click on it and notice what the top story is. If it's long, it must be important. If it's on the top, it must be important. If it's short and on the bottom, not so much. Now, here's where again we see another application. Women's sports coverage compared to men's sports coverage. Now, I've heard the critique that women's sports don't get covered because there's simply not the viewership for it. But is there simply not the viewership for women's sports because it doesn't get covered? That would be a great question. Or tragic crime news as compared to community building news, right? The story of the cat being rescued out of the tree by the fireman is always at the end of the news story, never the top of the hour. In fact, news often starts with tragedy and crime. And why is that? Do we then think that there's more crime in the neighborhoods where we live simply because it gets more airtime, or it's the top of the hour story? These are all good questions to consider, and that brings us to the end of the agenda setting theory talk.